Starting temperature 18.3 degrees, 18.3. And the starting mileage is 49410, 49410. Hey YouTube, it's gentlemansnine. Just heading to work. Again. It's a Thursday, I think. It's kind of weird. I lose track of these days because my work days go by so they seem long, but they go by quickly. I don't know if that even makes sense. But what ends up happening is I go into a routine, right? You wake up, go to work, the day goes by quickly or slowly or however it seems to feel that day. Head home, and then you gotta do the standard eat and all that other stuff, and then go to sleep and repeat. And my weeks seem to go by very fast. I know earlier in my career they went really slow. Now weekends are just like bam, bam, bam. Anyways, I think I talked about in my last video that we're going to change our software development lifecycle. And really what that just means is how the process that we use to build software. And in this process that we're going to, and I'll try to keep this generic, there are two measures that the team has to provide. So if you can think about any project, you can break it down into smaller parts. So, man, I don't even know. So if I were to say, like, you're going to build a house, you can focus on the basement, the first floor, and then the second floor, or whatever. I don't know, whatever. You're going to build it in that order. And in the initial pass, you don't really know all the details, at least in software you don't. And so what we do is we provide a level of complexity. And that's a number scale. And the second round, so once work is approved to go ahead and move forward on whatever piece we agreed upon, the next thing that the team has to provide is effort. The amount of time that it's going to take to produce whatever we agreed to produce. Okay, so if this makes sense. The first round, where you're talking about things at a high level, we're providing complexity. The second round, where we're actually going to do it, and we've got more details, we're actually going to provide effort. Now, effort and complexity are two different things. Now, bear with me. So the management team that we have, we're discussing this process before we have everybody else follow it. And when we got to this complexity versus effort part, the whole room seemed to agree that they're the same. So something that is of high complexity will take a lot of effort. Something that's of low complexity will take low effort. And, you know, me being who I am, I said that I believe everybody's thinking about this incorrectly. Do you guys ever get sick of me doing the same route every day? Anyways, I said it's possible for something to have a low level of complexity but high effort, and it's possible to have something that's high complexity and low effort. Okay, so the examples I used were, let's say we're going to make a change to the application, and we're gonna make it so it reads out values from some file differently. And what I said is, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that every piece of code, every application that we have uses this functionality. And so what do you think the level of complexity is? And everybody said extremely high. And you ask why, and they say, well, it's because you have to test all these different things. Excuse me. Okay, so then what I said was, well, wait a second. What I'm about to tell you is, for me to make that change, it's like one line of code. One line. So now let's reevaluate. Is this complex or simple? And so obviously they agreed that for me, because I'm only changing one line of code, it's simple. But the testing effort is still complex because it's a lot of things you have to test. And I said, is it complex because you don't know what you need to test, or is it complex because it really is truly complex? So rephrased, are you saying it's complex because it's truly complex, or are you saying it's complex because it's a lot of effort? And everybody said both. And I said, well, how about this? What if I told you that one line code change, you only have to test one application? then they said, well, now the complexity is like small because it's only 1. I'm like, okay, what if I told you that instead of 1, it's 15? And then they said, well, now it's high, extremely high. I'm like, well, how could it possibly go from testing one application complexity, which is small, to something that's 15 times more and extremely more complex? How could it go from simple to really complex? And I said, I would agree that the effort went up, but the complexity still has to be low. And of course, there's some disagreement. And so everybody said, you have to test these 15. It is now complex. Okay, so what I said was, so if one person can test one application and it's simple, and if one person tests all the applications as complex, what if I told you there were 15 people, each one would test one application? And then they said, well, now the complexity is low. And I said, well, wait a second. How could it change from low complexity to high complexity to low complexity just by changing the number of people? The only way that possibly makes sense is if the effort is changing. So the total net effort is the same. We just have it spread across multiple people. But the complexity itself still must be low. And I said, what it could also be is that you're not knowledgeable about something. You're not necessarily which applications to test, what screens to test. So the more information I provide you, excuse me, the less complex it could be in general. And of course, well, that didn't quite make sense. And I said, well, here, how about this? Here's something that we do every day. I said, everybody in this room does this every day. I said, you wake up, you get ready, and you jump into your car, a very complicated piece of machinery, and then you drive it to work, staying on the roads, obeying the laws, hopefully following all the traffic signals, watching out for other people, not running them over, avoiding accidents, all this other stuff. A very complicated process, but you call it simple, right? Everybody in the room agreed that driving a car was simple. And I said, well, wait a second. How about somebody who is like 15 or 16 years old, who's never driven a car before? Would they consider that task complex or simple? And of course they agreed, well, it's complex. And I said, well, how could it possibly be that something for one person is very simple and the other one is very complex? Could it be that one person is missing information? And so it was basically after that example, everybody kind of got the gist that, hey, wait a second, just because something's complex doesn't mean that it's also high effort. It just could be that there's a lack of knowledge. And I said, there's always examples that will be the opposite of the examples I just gave you. But what it really means is if we say something is very complex, we should be asking ourselves, wait a second, is it that I'm missing information? I need to ask more questions. I should be able to take that thing that's really complex and break it down into smaller pieces, smaller, more understandable pieces. And I said, that's all my point is. There's a difference between complexity and effort, and we should know what those are. And when we see the discrepancy, we should ask more questions. And what's funny is I actually got people to say I've convinced them. And I'm like, well, wait a second, you're professionals, all older than me with more experience. How could it possibly be that I convinced you? Shouldn't you be convincing me? No, wait a second, I didn't say that out loud, but anyways, got my point across. It all worked out. And I went to talk to my couple of the guys on my team about it that are going to do this process first, and they got it right away. They knew exactly what I was talking about. And I didn't even have to provide the examples, so that was awesome. It was really funny that I actually have to spend more time and effort to convince management excuse me, than my own teammates. But anyways, here's something to ponder. I will talk to you guys later.
Mileage 49450, 49450.